Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Aran. I'm a recovered drug addict. Firstly, thank you, James, and thank you to the committee for asking me to be of service and share, and thank you for that. And my home group is Hackney Heaven on a Saturday. That's CA. And just to start, welcome to any newcomers or welcome to people who are on this meeting the first time or venturing in, to CA or fellowship to find out or even curious of what's going on. Let me just start with what it's all about. It's a step one chair, the first step in our 12 steps in recovery. And it tells us, I'll start with this, and it tells us from chapter 2 from the big book. And that reading that James just read out there, really says it all. And there's a lot of powerful words in there for me, isn't it? There's a lot of really, a hopelessness and a tragic kind of what am I up against here? And for a long time, that really didn't, for some reason I don't know why, the reason it's irrelevant, but that just wouldn't hit home the hopelessness of what I was up against. But it tells us here, we learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. The delusion that we are like other people or presently maybe has to be smashed. Now, when I look at concede, because for me, that even, I'd hear that in the rooms and this idea of concede, I never, as a newcomer, I was a heroin addict, my vocabulary was limited, I was full of other things, but to concede, to admit or agree that something is true after denying or resisting it. And, that idea of denial, I understand, but resisting seemed to be a natural cause for me, and my story really is relevant in the step one experience. In roughly the last 10 years, from maybe 2006, from where I started entering in to 12-step fellowships and started my first treatment center was in 93, but that's irrelevant. But I started again in detoxes and looking for recovery through the 12-step module and going into rehab and treatment and trying to find out what I was suffering from and get some knowledge and this idea that, somehow I'd have these imaginary systems, imaginary lists, imaginary things to do that would somehow guide me and give me this power, this idea that somehow I'd be able to evade what I know today as this mental blank spot. I'm powerless over this thought. Step one tells me, I have to admit, and it talks about this unmanageability. And what I've come, the unmanageability pretty much is that when this thought happens for me, I cannot manage that to the point of even foresee what is going on. And I think that gets mixed up with the idea that my life is unmanageable. A drug addict's life is going to be unmanageable. And maybe I'm attaching it sometimes to these ideas that, oh my God, I'm falling apart, I'm homeless, the tragedy of my family. But initially for me, I had to come to understand that it's this thought. I'm powerless. As soon as that comes in, I'm gone without any idea of preempting what is coming or what may happen, as we call insanity. And for me, as I said, I started off, I'd be in a treatment center, I'd be doing lots of groups, I'd be given lots of information about what was going on for me. In my experience, I was going to meetings that didn't really talk about this. They were talking about a lot of stuff about sort of get down and talk about what's going on for me and triggers and all these things that I really thought would be kind of that I was jotting down as sort of safeguards against this thought suddenly enter my mind and having the ability then to control it. The truth of the matter is any idea that I've got anything going on that is going to stop this and somehow me even today have me pulling the levers that is keeping me clean, i.e. by doing service. I'm not doing this as a form of, I've got to do service and I've got to do this to stay recovered. I do this because I am recovered. So as I say, I'd come out of this is in 2007. I've done treatment. I've left. I'm told to go to meetings, 90 meetings in 90 days, hang around the winners. I'm going to meetings. For me, I would get periods of, I'm a heroin addict. I'd get periods and within a short time, I'd be back in again. In the last 10 years, 7 times in and out of detoxes, 3 treatment centers. So, I wasn't kind of this hard guy. There'd be periods where, and as soon as things got very bad, I was fortunate enough to be accepted again back into a detox. And over those 7 years, of the 7 times, 3 times in treatment. And each time I would, that was a call. Each time I would enter into treatment, I would leave with this understanding of self-knowledge that, right, I think this time, I've got something here. I've got an idea of what's going on. Excuse me, there's a call coming in, sorry. I've got an idea what I'm suffering from. I know I'm a heroin addict. I know basically if I stop seeing these people and I go to lots of meetings and really talk to people and sort of express what's going on for me, somehow that's going to keep me safe and protected. And each time, utterly, it failed. Because as soon as the thought would enter my mind, and sometimes that would be sudden, we talk about in our book, which I love, Jim's story, this vague recollection or this vague idea that maybe it isn't a good idea, Aran. But that was constantly overpowered, I'd be using again. And then we talk about this idea of being baffled. I'd be in a situation where I'd be using again. There'd be a period of time. Sometimes that was a year, sometimes more. And then I'd be back in detox again with this conviction. And by now they're getting to recognize me. They knew who I am. With this conviction that maybe I did something wrong last time. There was something I was not doing. This idea that something I'm not doing that's going to somehow keep me, I don't know too much about, did I want to control my using? That wasn't my experience. I was a heroin addict. I knew I had problems. I'd faced, I'd had a daughter in 1989 and abandoned her over heroin. I'd had a son in 2001. So I started to see certain things I'd be hearing at meetings about no human power. However, the idea of this resisting and somehow I'm going to be able to do this with just enough knowledge, just enough knowledge. Maybe if I just stop the heroin, and I love what I heard someone saying, because there's periods of my time, I was a Rasta. I thought maybe by smoking marijuana and somehow looking for spiritual guidance through this idea that somehow that would keep me safe. But every time I would flop, I'd be back on heroin. I'm powerless. I'm powerless over this thought. Maybe that could have been said to me, and I don't know. It's all hindsight. But I know this, after 7 treatment centres, after 7 detoxes and hospitalisation, I started to get an idea of the hopelessness and basically, for me, there's nothing seems to be what's going on here. Meetings are not doing it. The temporary sponsor I've got that's telling me to ring people and do these kind of things is just not making a difference. Hospitalisation hasn't done anything to sort of ward me or frighten me off. Many experiences involve my children, which we know about the tragedies that go with this illness. None of that could stop me. And yet I continue to have this idea that somehow, I was one of those people that would grasp onto the idea that if I can only get a 3-month or a 6-month, I almost got a 6-month key ring. If I can only hang about for this 6 months and get this key ring, that somehow, I'm proving something, that I've got this kind of amount of period of time without using, that would be something that would suffice for me, that would change something in my psyche and what was going on for me. But we know, I know too well, our book talks about, despair, it talks about frustration, it talks about bewilderment. These kind of things, I ended up constantly being in this mire or this thought pattern of this, but with the constant thought that I can do something about this. I have a plan, something will give, that I'll be able to manage this thought and have a block on it. And that kept following me, as I say, from 2006, and in 2015 something happened. But I know this much, this idea of getting these key rings, getting in the meeting, being involved around these people, talking a lot about what's going on, availed to nothing. And in hindsight, it made it worse. I was in meetings where not a lot of recovery was being talked about, not about the hopelessness of what I suffer from and this relapse condition that just keeps happening. And I have no real idea. I can't foresee it. I can't stop it. It just keeps happening. And each time I'm under this illusion or this idea that if I just do another detox, maybe this time I didn't quite, I'll get to AA meetings, I'll get to CA meetings, I'll get to NA meetings, I'll do all the meetings, get in all the groups, challenging groups, and maybe that's going to bring something out of me where I'll finally see why this keeps happening to me. I'll finally be able to kind of have a hold on stuff. And it really was this continuation of me having this power, me controlling, me pulling levers, this idea that it's all I need to do is hold on and just really be solid and convicted in what I'm doing here. And that belief followed me, as I say, for the best part of 10 years, And in and out of that, slowly, things start chipping away. And my experience, my sponsor says it, and I love it, this is not an intellectual exercise. The steps are an experiential thing. And I was continuing to look for this, somehow block it off and make it into something I could quite understand. And the fact of the matter was I needed this experience, and this experience was for me. In the end, excuse me for swearing, the trying was out of me. The idea of solving, me having these ideas, heroin, I was on a methadone script for the best part of 18 years. Everything had flattened out for me. But this idea of me somehow getting it and it will fall, and this idea of me constantly trying was gone. I totally realized this idea of resisting and me thinking that I could do something by my own help and ideas and plans, and as I say, these lists and we call it strategies, completely vanished within me. I could see no matter what was going to happen, I'm going to use again. I'm 49. It's 2015. The idea, I didn't even remember it was 7 detoxes. Twice I was admitted to hospital from there with operation. None of this kind of had an effect as much as I wanted it to, as much as I thought this must be the line in the sand which makes it for me. None of that happened. And there's where bewilderment come and baffled by what was going on. But I was continuously told, if I get to a meeting, share what's going on for me, somehow this is going to happen, grab key rings, and that's what I kept doing. But something shifted me. This experience I talk about, this step one experience I had, was that of myself, these weren't the words I would have used, but utterly I had this, I can't tell you how it happened or when, it wasn't planned, an experience that showed me, Aran, this is going to continue, you are going to use again. Anything I'm doing, and it's shown me a good many years, 10 years, that I was trying, it wasn't for my family no more. It was for the desperation of having a life and not dying. That started to become very prone and the number one factor in my life. I'm walking around with a colostomy bag at one point, I can see where I'm going. Yeah, I can't stop. And finally, when the shift for me was that we call abandoning me, I letting go of these ideas that I have the knowledge, I have somehow this power inside me to stop this. And I'm a recovered drug addict, and it talks about a seemingly hopeless state, body and mind. And what I'm more interested in is the mind. The crux of the problem is in my mind. Because there are periods I could stop. I'd do detox. I was on methadone scripts. And yet when the thought would come, crash, I'm gone again. It's not the first drug. It's this thought that kept persistently coming. And I'd have no defense of, hold on, Aran. Let me just, be able to see what comes of that. As I said, when it's the worst thing, the most insane thing to do, to use again, the defense is not there for that, for me to follow that. So that's my pattern for 10 years, And we know my experiences of progressive illness, I know that today, and eventually, and homelessness didn't do it for me. And there'd be periods of time I'd see vague things, or someone, would pray for me. And I'd get glimpses of stuff, but it wasn't enough. The veil of my mind and this idea I'd be suddenly up again. I'd be rebuilt. I think this time I can do it. I'd be in a hostel. Things are looking good. And I'm off again. And then when the thought comes, I have no defense against that. I have no idea what's going on. And that's my pattern, and at the age, and in 2015, a major shift happened for me around this experience, around the step one experience. That, the utter realization of me having any fucking power over this until today, that somehow I'm doing things, I'm doing service, I'm doing this, is somehow keeping me clean, is gone, moved from me. Because I know this much as I wanted, as much as my family wanted, the 2 children, 3 wives wanted, it just never came. That power wasn't within me, you know. And my story is that, and continue heroin, rehab, detox, stop for a while, feel okay. Thought comes in, I'm gone again. You know, what I'm up against is a hopeless, but I could not see that. You know, somehow I could not see that. It wasn't, I have this resistance in me in this fight that's going to show me I have the plans. I can get out of this. You know, little did I know what I was up against. You know, the hopelessness of this mindset that I know is addiction, that I suffer from. What that book tells about this, the hopeless, you know, the powerless over this thought. You know, and it's the accepting of that seems to have been the shift for me. The admitting was quite easy. I'm a heroin addict. I'm on script after script. It's quite easy to see that. But, you know, some acceptance and just the idea of, you know, I have no power within this to do anything about this. And that was the shift for me. And step one is that, you know, I don't have the power. And I think I'm going to leave it there. Thank you very much.